Welcome to Meet the Artist. This program is brought to you by Hedberg Public Library and JATV Media Services. I'm your host, Teresa Nguyen. Meet the Artist features various local artists whose work will be on display in monthly exhibits at Hedberg Public Library. And in the studio today, we have the very talented Sue Sunby, our featured artist for the month of May. Welcome to the studio, Sue.
Thank you so much.
So you are a quilter.
I am.
That is very special. And it's creative kind of art that you do. So tell me, when did that all get started? Do you remember when you were younger? Who was the first person who noticed you sewing?
So initially I started sewing like in high school, but it was the home ec that you had to take back in the late 60s. I got a sewing machine for high school graduation. My early attempts were mostly Halloween costumes for my children because they only had to stay together for one night. They loved them though, so it worked out well. I don't think I went down the quilting path until about 2000. And someone said, well, all you have to do is be able to sew a straight seam. It is more than that.
I would say.
But starting, all you have to do is sew a straight seam. And it was like a light bulb going on. It was pretty exciting.
That's really cool. So what was the first quilt that you were pretty pleased with then?
I'm pleased with pretty much everything that I make. Every quilter can look at their quilts and say, there's a mistake, there's a mistake. I think once it's done, it's such a great feeling.
Yeah.
And especially, I gift most of my projects are gifts, so I don't have a lot in my home except for my own personal
That's ones, a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I love doing that. I really do.
I'm sure it feels good. And did you study quilting or have you taken a class?
I have. Black Hawk Tech offered a quilting class. The instructor was Lisa Book, and that was this particular quilt that we made. So we came out of that, I believe it was like a 12-week class, and we would make one block each time.
When you say block, you mean one of these
so
squares?
each of the different designs was a different block that she taught us how to sew it. And if you look at them all, they all have a straight seam. So it can, but you know, it wasn't as easy as that, you know, and there was some challenges, but it was great having someone there to guide us through. I took it with a friend, and we've just made so many quilts since then that it was, and I still have the book that I got in that class, and so it was a wonderful class.
That's so great. And so the process for creating this, I see there's some small stitching going on in here. Tell me about that. So
you start out with your pattern, and once you have a pattern, you have to do your color selections. So if you notice, like on this one, this is the fabric we worked off of. So all of the other blocks blend with that.
Sure.
You'll see a little bit of something of that color in all the other blocks, so you choose that. And then you just start building your pieces, put them together like a puzzle, and then you have a long arm quilter, which I am not, does this kind of thing just to hold it's called a sandwich together. So there's the back and the front, and then there's a batting in between. So they do that quilting to hold it together.
I see.
In the early days, the women did quilting bees, and they did that all by hand.
On large frames that would stretch them out. My stepmother was a quilter, and so she had the big frame. And,
wow.
And sat around.
That's a talent. That's
when my dad was watching basketball, there was my stepmother quilting little
away.
Stitches.
Wow.
But yeah.
That's a talent. My mother does that. I do not.
Do you have favorite patterns or colors that you're drawn to?
I like bright, vibrant colors. So the thing hanging next to you is the fabrics are made by K Facet, and they're very bright and in your face, if you will.
Yeah, I love it.
Some people like very traditional fabrics. They have, you know, Civil War fabrics that were very popular then. They have all different kinds, but those are the kind that I'm very drawn to, is that very bright colors.
So tell me about this piece here that you brought in. This is this rather unique looking.
So that's a shawl, and I have 2 friends in the last year that were diagnosed with breast cancer, and it's difficult to know what to do for your friend when they're diagnosed with that.
Right.
So, of course, I went to the internet and I found this pattern in this group of women that were making something called a quilted hug. When people have chemotherapy, they usually have a port in their upper left shoulder. What this shawl does is it allows easy access for the nurses when they're giving chemo, while still providing a great deal of warmth, because you're very cold when you're getting chemo. So it appealed very much to me that I could make something physical with my hands that she could take with her, and she would know I was thinking about her.
That's so beautiful.
So,
I love the meaning. And then you have a little pocket.
Those are
on the
pockets in
inside.
between, and that's because their hands get so cold. They can just stick their hands in those pockets
Very
and wrap them
toasty.
around. And she loved it. When I was telling her about this, she says, "You should bring my shawl." And I thought, oh, I never thought of that. But again, I've made 2 of those and gifted them, and it's a great feeling giving something like that to someone.
Right.
It's very meaningful.
That's beautiful, Sue. So this colorful, it's just really busy, and I love it. It looks like something children would enjoy. Tell me about that.
So these are I Spy quilts. So
Hey.
I started collecting fabrics early on that have different things in them. And each of my 5 grandchildren have an I Spy quilt.
Do they?
And they get it as an infant. Where they really appreciate it, it was when they're about 2 years old. So what I try to do is make it unique to where they live, because I have grandchildren in Maryland, I have grandchildren in South Carolina, and they were also in Las Vegas. So I will, for instance, you can see this one has the Packers.
Right.
And it usually has
a guitar.
Right, Brewers. So when they get to that age where they can look at the bright colors, the mom or dad will say, "Can you find the parrotfish?" So everything they're real. So the turkey looks real, the train looks real.
Right.
There's dinosaurs, and the grandchildren learn the dinosaur's name, and it's
an educational piece in addition
it
to
is.
being fun. And what's your process in creating that?
So each of these little squares has to be what we call fussy cut. So I have a hexagon plate, a plastic piece, that you lay on your fabric and cut around that. And I try not to ever reproduce any of the pictures, so all of the pictures are unique on the whole quilt.
Sure.
So it required a lot of fabric over the years, and the last grandchild was born 3 years ago, and that was when the pandemic hit.
Oh.
And so I had this plethora of this wild fabric, and I converted most of it into masks.
Oh,
So I made about 500 masks when the pandemic
you did.
hit. And they were pretty wild, because I used this kind of fabric. So
Hey,
people,
those are fun masks.
well, they smiled when they got them. I did send 40 out to my son's Air Force base in...
Fantastic.
He did ask that it not be quite so wild, though. He says, it needs to be a little calmer, Mom. I said, oh, well, I can do that. So
More
theirs were
reserved
black.
for military usage.
Right.
Oh, so now this piece over here is so creative. What inspired you to do the sewing machine, and then you've got a quilt underneath it, and
So this is
butterflies?
a pattern called the featherweight, and it's the featherweight is the early Singer sewing machine. So lots of quilters collect those, and I do have one. And this was my last piece. So you start with a blank canvas, and you just start layering different fabrics on there. So this depicts they're sewing on a quilt. So all of the little flowers are separate, and the little butterflies are separate. I did add some bedazzling and
I see that.
put some sparkles on there.
That's so fun.
So when it hangs up, but it uses several different techniques. I find that quilting will never bore me because there's always something new. There's always something new to learn and to try.
Right.
And you don't love every one, but I do love that.
It's so cool. It's like there's a quilt inside the quilt. It's like quilt inception going on.
I enjoyed that. So that's my last piece, and this is my first piece. So
perfect.
I brought both of them in.
I'm so glad you did.
Yeah.
And if you were to give advice to someone who wanted to try quilting, you know, they're just starting out, what would you say?
I would start with a straight stitch, you know.
Okay.
Start with that, because then that kind of dials it down. And then I would recommend going to one of our local fabulous quilt shops. I don't think Black Hawk Tech is offering the class anymore, but a lot of the quilt shops do offer beginning quilting.
Sure.
And that gives you someone physical that can help you answer questions and stuff.
Right.
But with the internet now, YouTube, there's just such a wide range of information out there. It's fabulous. It's really
And patience with it?
patience, yes.
You need patience.
And know that the first pieces aren't going to be perfect, but it's more the journey, I guess, than the final piece.
And you mentioned to me prior to our interview that you create special quilts for called Quilts of Valor.
Yes, that's something we joined. We actually started a group in Orfordville.
Okay.
Dairyland Quilts of Valor. It's Quilts of Valor is a national group, and it was started in about 2003, I think. And the idea is that, much like the Quilted Hug, you are wrapping a veteran in a quilt. The significance is great. On Veterans Day out at the VFW, we presented, I believe, 15 or 20 quilts out there, and it was the first time I was part of the presentation. I was part of a lot of the sewing. Our group has probably made well over 100 quilts.
Really?
They're very.
And how do you determine who receives the quilts?
Someone volunteers their name, and you have to put it in as an application process.
Sure.
Someone that has been touched by war, has been part of one of our armed services.
Do you kind of aim for the, the older groups that...
You can. I would guess that all of them that we did out there, in fact, one gentleman that got a quilt I had made, he was 92, and he was from World War II. It was very special, and it's.
I love it.
I really like when we touch our Vietnam veterans, though. They need to understand their importance as well.
We appreciated their sacrifice. Whatever the outcome.
So that's another way I can use you can only use so many quilts in your home. You can only give so many before your children start saying, oh, that's enough, Mom, we're good. But being able to make those and give them that way is very meaningful. It makes my skill just that much more fun.
And you're going to have Quilt of Valor at Hedberg in May.
Yep. I'll have one of them hanging that I had made and put the application in for someone, and he said that would be fine. There will be some pictures of the presentation so they can see what the presentation might look like. And the supervisor of our group is going to have a little blurb so that if people want to learn more about it, they can.
That's a wonderful idea. I just love that. Giving to these men and women who sacrificed so much, who gave back to our country, and now you're giving back to them with your creative skills.
Yeah, it makes it worthwhile. It's just I've retired. Where when I was working full time, it was a little more difficult to carve out that extra time. But when you're retired, you've got more time, and it's a great way to use that skill set.
Yeah. Tell me about your past exhibits. Have you done some?
I would say I have one quilt that the only thing I've ever, honestly, when someone approached me about this and called me an artist, it was quite startling. It was not something I ever put on myself, but
it is art.
It's
fabric art.
I've gotten there. I've gotten there with it. Yes, it is. But the one that I'm hanging, we did have a challenge quilt where you have to have a certain pattern, and then you pick the colors, you do the quilt. And that was one that I actually won at, but that was with one of our quilt groups.
Wonderful.
And it was hung out at Loose Threads in Milton.
Nice,
Yeah.
very nice. Was it tricky to pick which quilts you would have for the Hedberg exhibit?
Yes.
It was.
It was. It was. I brought. I'm going to have two of the I Spy quilts because I have
Okay.
2 grandchildren in town, so we
Fun.
needed to, be fair.
Right.
But the more I thought about it, it would be nice to see the beginning, and it would be nice to see the end, and then I filled in between.
Very
with
nice.
different styles of quilts and.
Wow, a little something for everyone.
Yep.
Then. Are you excited for this?
I am. When I got them all out and I was looking at them, one of them is from a trip to Japan when my oldest was in the Navy there, and I got fabric from there.
Yeah.
And made a hanging depicting that time we were there, and so it just kind of walks you down different times in your life.
Little stories.
Yep.
They tell a story, each
Yep.
one.
Each
right?
one does. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. I love that. I'm a storyteller, so I love the idea of telling stories in different ways.
Yeah.
Gosh, thank you for coming in
Absolutely.
today
It's a
and
delight.
getting a sneak peek of your beautiful quilts, and we're glad we got to know you a little more
Thank you.
through this interview. And we invite the public to come visit the library this month to check out Sue's amazing quilt display. Thank you all for joining me today. Please check out this program on JATV Media Services, Charter Cable 994. You can also find it on JATV's YouTube channel. Remember, don't wait for another day. Go out and try some fabric art or make some wild, whimsical, wonderful art. I'm your host, Teresa Nguyen. I'll see you next time on Meet the Artist.